This is FARFETCH Threads, our people podcast, where you can hear the real stories about life as a FARFETCHer.
Hello and welcome to FARFETCH Threads, our people podcast. I'm Georgy Agadzhanov and I lead our people teams in Russia and Middle East. And today I'll be talking to Natalie Malone on the topic of how we hired FARFETCH. Natalie joined FARFETCH in 2018 to lead global talent acquisition strategy. She has over 20 years of experience in spanning multiple industries, including financial services, technology, and fashion, and has led teams across North America, APAC, and EMEA. Hi, Natalie.
Good morning, Georgy.
So glad to have you with us. It's amazing to talk to you today. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and your FARFETCH journey.
Sure. I'm just coming up on my 3-year FARFETCH anniversary, which is incredible. Time really flies. Yeah.
3 years already.
Exactly. It's interesting. I think my journey is a bit, probably not unique, but when FARFETCH reached out to me, I wasn't looking for a new opportunity. At the time, I was working for Google, leading global recruitment strategy for Google's technical talent. And I was quite happy doing what I'm doing and felt that I had good runway where I was. But a wise mentor once told me never to say no until you have something to say no to, which basically means always pick up the phone, always make connections, always make time to learn about new opportunities. And really glad I did. What attracted me most to FARFETCH was how ambitious the growth vision was and how clear and frankly inspired everyone that I've spoken to was around the vision, the mission, and how clear they were about the values, how they were going to go about it. And I found that it was just such a unique moment in time that I couldn't not join on the journey. And one of the things that I found most compelling, actually, and I still do, is the motto that FARFETCH has, which, several of them, but one of which that resonates most with me is do what's never been done. And if you love a challenge, this is the environment for you because there is clear runway to do what's never been done and a great deal of appetite to allow anyone really in the company to think big and go for it and bring everybody along in the journey. So it's been really exciting.
Yeah, all of this really resonates with me. And we're sure glad you followed that advice of your mentor. Natalie, 2020 was a big year for us. We launched a new framework called Go Far to encompass several of our people team processes. And you were an integral part of this project. Can you tell us about this, please?
Sure. So Go Far was really more of a formalizing elements that we already had in place, but thinking broadly and building for the future. The Go Far model has 3 very basic principles. We want to make sure that every FARFETCHer has the opportunity to thrive. And we found that in order to do that consistently, one must demonstrate 3 areas. The first is, are they good for FARFETCH, which is essentially, do your behaviors demonstrate an alignment with the FARFETCH values? It's not what you're doing, but it's how you go about doing things. And we have strong values like teamwork and collaboration and thinking global. And it really is critical for us to find people that are aligned with that vision. The second element is, are you good for the role, which is essentially, do you have the skills and capabilities to do the job that we are asking you to do today? And then finally, and one that I find most compelling, is, are you good for growth? Which is, can you successfully evolve from the realities of today to the requirements of the future? Now, what I think is most exciting about this model is that we don't just use it on the talent acquisition side. The same parameters for assessment that we use during the interview process are the ones that we use during performance management. It is the inputs that feed into your development program, and it's also how we reward and recognize behavior. So it really does apply throughout the journey itself. The reason I said this was more formalized is because we had always done assessments for values and for your job-specific capabilities. What we added was the good for growth. And the reason was very simple. We have great growth aspirations, and because of the pace of change, we notice that the people that are happiest here are the ones that are able to evolve from the role that they're doing today into other requirements in the future. And because we want to invest in the Farfetchers' development, we look for attributes like a growth mindset, an ability to drive towards results, hunger to learn, and a desire to solve really complex problems, and an excitement with these problems. So ultimately, in environments like ours, and that sort of our intersection with fashion and technology, and in order to do what's never been done, you have to thrive in ambiguity, and you have to embrace the opportunities that come with that. And so by assessing for those elements on the front end, we essentially make sure that we have like-minded individuals that don't necessarily mind that the job that we hired you to do 6 months ago has evolved and it's now something completely different, because the challenge and opportunities are still there and you still have the core capabilities to be successful in role.
Yeah, I've been at Farfetch for almost 4 years now, and I remember how things were before. And I think this is indeed a very revolutionary idea for Farfetch, and it allows us to further embed our values into our people operations. We are a values-driven company, and you mentioned that GoFar is largely based on our values. I think it will be cool to list them for our listeners now. We have 6 values, which are: be revolutionary, be brilliant, be human, amaze customers, think global, and todos juntos, which is all together in Portuguese. I think that at all levels of Farfetch, the values are taken super seriously, and all of our people processes are structured around these 6 values. Natalie, can you tell us about a time when you experienced our values in action?
That's such a difficult question to answer, Georgie, because as you said, it's really daily in everything that we do. Perhaps I can think of the one that's most relevant for right now in light of the pandemic and sort of the unprecedented times that we're in. And I would say that there was a clear demonstration of the be human value. So certainly we always looked at Farfetchers as individuals and had people processes in place to make sure that they felt supported and recognized and had the tools that they needed to be successful. The pandemic actually, though, brought a different element. It sort of merged people's professional lives and personal lives. With all of the Zooms that we're doing, you're basically invited into people's homes. You see their families, their partners, their roommates, and you get to know them on a far more personal level. And one of the things that we discovered is that prior to the pandemic, we were quite site-focused in terms of how we prefer to work. So while we all traveled and we all worked from home when needed, we did have a bit of a default that suggested that when we come into the office, we're more productive and we're able to collaborate more effectively. But actually, the pandemic had taught us that this is a great leveler, and when everybody is home and working on a computer, it really broke down the global barriers. But beyond that, there was also an element of the type of support that individuals needed as humans and as parents, as caregivers, and for the well-being of the company. And what I thought was really interesting is that we discovered that we didn't necessarily have to have such a strict, you work from 9 to 5 and your requirements are X, Y, and Z. But rather, when you trust people to do the right thing and allow them to make work for them, so allow them to fit their personal life around their work commitments, not only did we see productivity maintained, but in fact it grew and happiness grew. And what I thought was really interesting was that as the first lockdown started easing and some people started going back into the office, it was really important for us not to lose those learnings. And so FARFETCH instituted a formal policy called Make Work Work for You. And it's based on a very simple principle, which is we trust you to do the right thing. We trust that you know what makes you most productive and what makes you happiest. And obviously within different parameters across geographies with legal requirements, the nuances are slightly different, but the objective is consistent, which is do what you need to do in your personal life when you need to do it, as long as the work gets done. And I think that speaks volumes to the fact that FARFETCH sees you as an individual and not just someone that is there to produce output. Beyond that, it sort of grew. And what I thought was really interesting is that organically within the organization, we started having well-being guardians and champions for the notion of well-being, because we saw that the downside of working from home is that work and life got mixed and that people found it harder to disconnect. And obviously with the pressures of the pandemic and caring for children and others, there was a strong element of the need to focus on well-being overall. There were many efforts and initiatives that have launched since then and are still launching, frankly, today. Some include rolling out Unmind globally, which is a digital mental health platform. We added additional caring days to allow you to either take care of yourself or your children or anyone else in your environment, be it roommates, be it elderly parents, it didn't matter. And then there was also a lovely time at the end of last year where everybody received a one-time bonus, and it was no strings attached, but it basically, the one mandate is do one thing or many things with this fund that contributes to your well-being. And it could be anything. It could be, make sure that you have a better setup for work and you get like a comfier table or chair or whatever the case might be, all the way to, maybe purchase a Peloton bike if that's what you wish. So it's still happening, it's still rolling. Every few weeks we do have rollouts of new initiatives, and I find that it really helped bring to life the Be Human value. It was no longer just about how we treat each other with respect and how we think about the broader impacts of our actions, but really how do we take care of ourselves, and the extension of it, how do we allow our FARFETCHers to take care of their families and friends and the people that they care about.
Yeah, hearing all of this it brings back a lot of memories, because all of the things we did in 2020 are, for me, they were like inspirational. I think that we really excelled at being flexible, at taking care of our teams. I do miss the office, though. I think our offices are unique, and they just are such cool places of power, in my opinion, and they resonate with our values. So I can't wait when we can go back.
I totally agree. But even when we do go back, I think it will be with far greater flexibility.
Yeah, for sure. And, I love that we approach this globally also, really tailoring the people experience at regional level. As you mentioned, it allowed us to have a record low turnover in 2020 and see increases in people happiness and engagement. So I think we were really on track with that, with those activities. Natalie, I wanted to ask you about another key driver that we are concentrating on as a company: conscious inclusion. Attracting diverse talent is a huge focus of the Find and Hire strategy. Can you share our strategy and some of the initiatives we have recently launched and are currently working on?
Absolutely. Look, I think the first step is to be consciously inclusive. And in order to do that, we all must recognize that we have unconscious biases. and that they are unconscious, which is a little bit difficult to tackle. One of the things that I'm really proud of FARFETCH is that we've recognized very early on that in order for us to be effective with the social movement and really bring to life the principles that we want to embody, we need to make sure that everybody generates this awareness and understands what are the tools that are at their disposal to address unconscious bias. So we've gone through company-wide training. We're actually still rolling it out to everyone, but we do feel that in order to have a diverse environment, you need to make sure that that's sort of core principle. Last year, we also formally launched FARFETCH committees, which I think are really great internal representations of the markets that we serve. They're different interest groups, but they allow us to amplify voices. And we have groups such as the Black Employee Network, the FARFETCH Disabled Network, our FARFETCH Parents Community that I'm part of, our Far Out LGBTQ plus community, and they all highlight areas of sensitivity that require thought and focus. And each one of them is sponsored by an exec that sits on the executive committee, and we take it very seriously. And I think that it's just another great way for us to ensure that the agenda gets integrated into everything that we do. On the people side, within talent acquisition, we have spent a significant amount of time in trying to ensure that every step of our process is debiased, or that we're minimizing bias as much as possible. So for example, in the talent acquisition side, we are leveraging technology to debias our job descriptions. I mean, the software just allows us to ensure that we keep the job descriptions consistent and accessible to all. Our sourcing strategies have also changed greatly. We have enhanced focus on partnering with social, academic, and professional organizations that represent the type of talent that we want to have within FARFETCH and that represent the markets that we serve. We've recently partnered with organizations like Black Young Professionals. My G-Work has been a partner of ours, I think now for maybe 3 years, and also Flexa, which is a great organization that allows us to expose the flexibility that we offer in terms of our work environment. Beyond the sourcing, once somebody is actually in the selection process, we really take great pains to ensure that the process is fair and that the decisions are made in an unbiased manner. And that includes dividing the assessment structure such that each individual interviewer is only assessing one element of the individual rather than the individual as a whole, and that we come together as a group in a consensus format in order to exchange inputs. But these inputs, crucially, are based on standardized scorecards. So if you have a software engineer being interviewed in Beijing and one interviewed in Porto or in London, we know that the questions that we will ask are consistent, and the scale to which we assess is consistent as well. And so we really try to make sure that the find and hire process, which is what we call our talent acquisition process, leads by example, and that we scrutinize every single stage of the process. But I'm very proud to say that the scrutiny continues in all of our people processes as well.
Wow, amazing. I think this is so very important, and lots of learning still to happen. You mentioned FARFETCH communities. I think that's a super initiative. I think everybody can find a common group and really feel at home as well. And it always keeps growing, right? I think we just launched a new network that's called FARFETCH East Network, which is very exciting. Still developing this project. Natalie, given all we discussed today, what advice you give to any candidates listening? And
Well, Georgie, so I think with the pandemic, the job market has become far more challenging, and looking for a job anytime is a long and frustrating and often stressful process. So if I reflect on what pieces of advice I would share with anyone who's interested in making a change, I would say there's a couple of things. The first is the social movement over the last year or so has really demonstrated that it's critically important for you to align yourself with the values of the organization that you hope to join, and that in order for you to do that, you need to find signals and information that suggest what those values are. FARFETCH, for example, we publish our people commitments on our external website. As we've spoken extensively today, our values are incredibly strong, but it's the candidates that need to ensure that they're aligned with those values, and that they hold the organization accountable to not just talking about them, but actually probing on how they live the values. The second is around leveraging your network. So it's the default that we had in the past was there's a job that gets posted on a website and you submit your application and you hope for the best. And I think that there's always an opportunity to continue to do that. But the market has changed, and I think that in order to be successful, greater engagement is required by candidates, and it's around leveraging your social network. We talked a little bit earlier about how FARFETCH partners with social, academic, and professional organizations in order to attract talent that represents the markets that we serve. And I think candidates can certainly take a step forward in joining these organizations that are aligned with who they are and what they represent, in order to build a network of like-minded individuals and to get exposure to these types of opportunities. We often also reach out directly to the talent acquisition teams, which is fine. This is our job, but you have to remember that within talent acquisition, we review, sometimes thousands of candidates, and it is difficult to stand out. Another way for you to get inroads into an organization is actually to reach out to people within the business, those that are doing the role that you're interested in doing. And rather than asking for a job, focus in the conversation more of like, I really admire your organization. I admire what they do in this particular space. Would you give me 20 minutes to talk about how you do your job? And that type of conversation and alignment is it opens doors. At worst, you've just created another contact in your network, and at best, you will have a connection where they will recommend you to speak to somebody else, and that might lead to a role. The third, and I think this is really crucial, is be prepared. Very often, we see candidates that it's very clear that they haven't quite thought through their narrative and what their story is, and that comes through. Be prepared in terms of certainly what the interview process will look like. If it's behavioral-based questions, make sure that you practice the STAR method. Focus on building stories of not just what you've done, but how you've done it, and make sure that you understand the mechanics of the organization so that you can bring to life the most relevant examples. The final one is very unique to the current situation, but one that I suspect will be required as we move forward, which is, how do you do interviews and how do you assess an organization when you're in front of a computer and you don't have all of the physical inputs that you normally would have? You have to realize that the way you come across through a computer screen is quite different, and you have to work a little bit harder to build a connection with the interviewer, finding common ground and making sure that you have good eye contact, and that your, even basic sort of structural things like your computer screen is positioned in a way that gives the interviewer the best angle. And actually, research says that it's slightly higher than your eye level, if you want to know. We also, if you wear glasses, for example, make sure that the interviewer doesn't see the glare of your computer, but actually sees your eyes, because again, that eye contact is really critical. And then because you don't have those physical inputs, make sure that you're prepared to ask questions that you wouldn't otherwise have to ask, like, what does the work setup look like? What is the physical environment? What type of people are employed there? What is the composition of the population, if that's not information that's already readily available publicly? Those are all things that we may not have had to think about previously, but we do in today's environment. Above all, I think just be true to yourself and be thoughtful about what type of environment you require in order to thrive, and hold yourself accountable to finding organizations that are aligned with your set of requirements.
Wow, such great advice, Natalie. I'm very much involved in the selection process myself, and I think your advice is just spot on and can really help candidates at any interview, not only at FARFETCH. And what really resonates with me as well is the part about asking questions during the interview. I think that's, for me, during my interviews, I always give candidates as much time as they need to ask questions about the company. And when candidates come with a set of interesting, thought-through questions, that just really excites me, because I can give them a lot of information and help them make a decision. Because interviews is not only us selecting somebody, it's the candidate selecting who they're going to work with. So I think is very important.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's also an opportunity for candidates to demonstrate the research that they have done, and with their questions, give additional data points to the interviewer of how they would think about problems that we're currently encountering, and how they would fit in this environment.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much, Natalie, for a great conversation on today's episode of FARFETCH Threads. And thank you to everyone who has been listening to us. Stay tuned. See you next time, and please be safe.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you never miss an episode of FARFETCH Threads by subscribing to our Spotify and FARFETCH People YouTube channel. If you're ready to do what's never been done, visit farfetchcareers.com.